there. They couldn't. They said that the carriers from those islands, they left those islands, built their own canoes, war canoes that could carry as many as 60 warriors. Why they went there? To arm forces together, their forces together. And the enemy, the Spanish, the British, and the French. Another thing was happening at that same time. They would kill every Spanish or British or French on that ship, sailors, the captain. The cliche I was talking about is this question of side and rule. These islands were declared neutral by treaty, the Treaty of Paris. You know why? Because they could not conquer. You may think you've heard it so often that there's no use mentioning it again. But this ethic, dogma, whatever, is still with us today, divide and rule. And you know, it's as old as 500 years. The Black Caribs, they went to the different islands, capturing people off the plantations and taking them to these islands together.
My girl.
Wagwan, tell me.
Wagwan.
Let me see a nice.
Inhabited most of the islands, moving about in canoes big enough to carry 50 people. Columbus marveled at their length. The Indians introduced the explorers to pineapple, tobacco, hammocks, and rubber balls, which the Europeans had never seen before.
Let's easy me back again. Full time.
Expand on that. We have a little, well, actually it's 1795 when Joseph Satuya was conquered and he was killed. And even though he was killed,
the name that you mentioned, who was that?
Joseph Satuya was our paramount chief. He was the leader of the settlement at that time. Okay. Because we were settled on St. Vincent.
Okay.
Yes.
We were settled in St. Vincent because what happened, the Amerindians were, the Indians were the first who were living in St. Vincent. And so the Caribs, they went to St. Vincent and killed the Amerindians. And they took their wives as additional wives.
Because they don't want them calling themselves indigenous. This is a real problem. They know they're indigenous, but they're having this argument with the white establishment over land, which we'll get into the documents of Joseph Smith in a little bit, which I thought we got into on the other video, but we will. Sorry, y'all, pouring some water. Give me 1 second. I can play this for y'all.
Okay, I think that's why.
Yes, that's why.
And that unification is what we call Garifuna or Garinagu today.
Yes, because remember, after the shipwreck, the Africans, they ended up and they intermingled. And
right,
that's
the name. That's the end product that we call Garifuna.
So who came up with the name Garifuna? Who came up with that name?
I don't really know, but
I think what happened, we have a coalition of Garifunas within the diaspora. And I think they come together and they make that decision among them.
Because in St. Vincent, some of them call themselves Kabinabu. And, but in Belize, you will find out we're saying we are Garinagu. Right?
Yes.
But we know that the word Garinagu means, we know that it means those who trade gold. Because remember, a part of our heritage, our ancestors, trading gold, and they came to this region years before Columbus, like I have mentioned to you.
Yes, yes.
Right. Now, while living on St. Vincent, under the leadership of Joseph Satuye, the French came, and you know, as usual, they wanted to exploit the area and the people because they wanted the land. They wanted all the minerals that they can get, whatever value they find.
Right.
And they came first, but they were unable to conquer us.
Exactly.
So when the British came, they over a period of time, at the year of 1795, they killed our paramount chief, Joseph Satuye. And after they killed the
paramount chief,
our brothers and sisters who were there, they started to, once they are captured, they prefer to kill themselves than for them to be enslaved.
Got it.
And because we refuse to be slave or enslaved by the European, they exiled us from St. Vincent
to Balisau.
And they took us to Balisau.
They exiled to where? Where did you go from there?
From St. Vincent to Balisau.
Okay, where's Balisau?
Balisau is an island that is a hard rock.
There's no vegetation.
No vegetation, because the intention was actually to genocide, to kill the entire race.
Right.
Our food, yes, our food that we eat can last many years, and it will not spoil. And that's the reason why, when they exiled over 5,000 of us to Balisau, 2 years after when they went for them to take to Rotan, Honduras, it was a little bit over 2,000. Some of them died because of water. Some of them died because of food. They ran out of food. And, you know, because Balisau don't have they don't have what it takes for them to survive.
Right.
I'd like to add, though, that it was 5,000 who were exiled.
Exactly.
And only 2,800 that arrived in Rotan, Honduras.
Because some of them died on Balisau and others died on the way to Rotan. Yes.
So you guys, so I need to clarify something. When they exiled the 5,000, was that just the Africans, or was that the mixture of the Caribs?
It was
Garinagu already.
It was Garinagu already.
Yeah.
Oh, so it was
some of the kids. Yes, some of the children were left behind. And today in St. Vincent, you can still go and find a few who call themselves Kalinago, but they don't speak the language. They lose majority of the aspects of the culture.
For those who remained, had to abandon their culture and their language. And that's why those that are in St. Vincent today cannot speak their language and don't know anything about their culture.
Exactly.
And that's why we from the diaspora send people from the different regions to teach them about the culture,
the language and the culture,
the dance, the music, and so on. So that's what we're doing.
Right. How come then they only sent the Africans, the 5,000 Africans, to this place? What about the natives that was there? They kept them there? Or
actually, the Indians intermingles with the African, and that's what we call Garinago.
Yes.
Got it.
So when they exile, they catch as many of us that they could caught at that time, and they exile them. Some of the kids stay behind. But with those who stayed behind, they were stripped of the different aspects of the culture.
The so-called African American not being the indigenous people here or being the Indians or whatever have you that they want to refer to the indigenous people as. There's a difference between the indigenous people and the folks that the Moors that were coming over here from North Africa. Now, we're not talking about Moorish science. We're not talking about people that go to the temple and learn a certain set of rules that the Moorish Science Temple identifies. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the people who were referred to as in terms of ethnicity as Moors, and their identities have also become obscured. Where some of these people who were North Africans or Northwest Africans, some of them ended up being classified as white. Some of them.
Also, we have to always remember this, that they were the original South European. That the Southern Europe is a tropical climate. It is not a barren, cold wasteland as they make it sound. Southern Italy and Southern France and all that stuff, this is places you can go all time of year and beach and dock. This is why they brag about, you know what I'm saying, just pull the yacht off the bay of Saint-Tropez, you know what I'm saying? This is one of the greatest places to go visit. So whenever they came down to get this land, you see why they came to get it, because there was also a tropical people, the Black Bambinos, your Black Greek, or your Minoans, your Etruscans, they all were there at this, and from ancient times. So you got the people like your Medicis, they come out of that ancient bloodline. Your Stuarts, your different other Black European, your McDubs, your MacDubs, your McGuffey, anything Mac or Mick, before the exile, that's who you're gonna see over there in the area. Let's keep it moving.
Ended up being classified as the same as us, and so you get this amalgamation, and that's part of where English, I think, is the biggest culprit in this whole process of obfuscating our identity, because the English are the same ones that call Hindustan India and mix the idea up of, well, the people in India are the Indians and the people in America are Native American. This is all play on English. When the Spanish and Portuguese were there, they didn't call them people that. Yeah, that was actually about the same time the Pequot War was happening. The British weren't in India then. So who was calling India then? The Hindus call it Bharat, and they still do.
Hindustan.
I got a visa a couple years ago to go to Hyderabad, and on the visa,
Hindustan.
It's got Bharat on the government document, the Republic of Bharat. Where did India come from? This is all play done in English. And the way you can point to things like this, you can use them as a smoking gun to show, hey, now you got these people here that were Indians that were documented in India. And they were taken into slavery. And everybody assumed slaves were African Americans, right? This is a smoking gun. This is what they're telling you what they're doing. They're telling you they are taking, because that was the aim since they first got here, was to take the indigenous people and enslave them. And they tell you, oh, well, it became unfeasible to enslave these people, so we went to Africa and got them. You had to go 5,000 miles away to go, and in the middle of hurricanes and everything else, Sargasso Sea that nobody likes to talk about, that you can't get through. Dead zone in the middle of the Atlantic. And brought a bunch of Africans here from not North Africa, not Northwest Africa, but from West Africa, from like Ivory Coast, from Nigeria, what's now Nigeria and Angola and so forth, from Namibia. That's what they're supposed to have gotten these people to bring them to Virginia, New England, Delaware, Maryland, really? When you break it down like that, how can people really? How can they really argue against what you're talking about? How can they? It doesn't make logistical sense.
Money wise, I ain't trying to make.
But again, they don't like talking about the Indian Wars because the Indian Wars are where they admit what they were doing. They admit.
Well, I got a question.
Go ahead.
I got a question because thank you to you both for this, because this has got me thinking about and tying in some other things. Well, in order to defeat someone, you need them. So when they were going, for these Pequot Wars and all these wars, they had to use us against them. But how did they figure out how to even get in to begin with? They had to deal with the allies or deal with the people that our ancestors were trading. So it's got me thinking about the wars that happened, when, what's it called? The United Kingdom. How the United Kingdom came about. I'm thinking about the wars and the battles that were established with the people who our ancestors were trading with. And after they had the wars and battles there, then they came here. Would that be correct in thinking like that or tying it like that?
You own it, because you have to go back to the Dutch. And when they came with those wars, you had some that sided, some tribes that sided with the Dutch. Some tribes were saying, we're not having this. So you have another crop of people, the British, that are coming along with the French. Listen, we don't want to leave them out because they were coming along in the Carolina region as well. So you had people that just say, hey, we can't continue to go to war. And you see this in movies all the time. It's usually like they'll go to the second in command, the son of the chief, and he'll say, well, we need to come to some compromise. I'm tired of seeing all the bloodshed. And the father's like, no, this is our land, this is our people. And they get into an inter-family struggle, power struggle. This happens all the time. Like, say it's happening in modern day. You see the people all the time. I even see it with people from the islands that are swear up and down that they're not the same people that live here on the mainland. I see it all the time. We're not like y'all. Y'all over there and the whole nine. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to say this and I'm going to be quiet. And I don't want to get into eerie stuff, mysticism, any of that. I'm just simply saying, when Jamaicans come to the mainland, what area do they go to? And it's a concentration of them.
New York.
Anybody?
Come on, New York.
You're talking about in any state?
I'm saying in anywhere in what we call the mainland. What state, what area do they, or it's a concentration of Jamaicans?
Urban area.
Yeah. In New York especially.
This is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
They are coming back home. They don't really
they are.
figure out why Jamaicans, they in a tropical region.
Still there?
Why do they go to New York? Why all they're coming back home?
Yep. Yes, they are. And I've noticed too in my family and in a lot of my friends' families, a lot of folks that are in New York now have relatives about 3 to 5 generations back, North Carolina. Same area in North Carolina too.
Yes,
the area that the Tuscarora War was fought. And there's all these people I'm talking about from New York City all the way out to White Plains. They in different parts of New York, but they all got family that's from down south. They going home. And a lot of them come down here too for family reunions and stuff. A lot of them. They know where the home is. Even if they don't know, like in their generation, that's home. The same family always seem to move to the same areas. And a lot of them over the generation don't even know their family anymore because of how our families get split up. But we seem to travel in groups to the same areas.
Yes, sir.
Same way with Haiti going home to Texas, the Caruncle.
Go ahead, Brother Copper.
They going home.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I got an example for you. I got a cousin married into the family. This brother told me that his mama and her people came from Jamaica. And I was talking to him and his wife, my cousin, a while back about how there was a slave catcher, had the same name as his family does. Had a huge plantation there, right here in southeastern Virginia. Captured Nansemond and Tuscarora Indians and sent them to Jamaica. Same name. They kept the name in the family the whole time and came right back home. That's how it works. People get sent somewhere. They make it home. They may not know they're home.
But
that's right. That's how the Creator works. He takes his children and brings them home. Now, you can expand that out to a bigger level, and that may start to explain some of the things in ancient history, too, why everybody's trying to get here.
Yes, sir.
Our story.
Yes, sir.
Right, because you know, and the normal narrative they give you is, well, they want our freedom, they want this and that. No, it's deeper than that. Because we a lot less free than we used to be, and things are a lot more bleak than they have been in the last few decades. But people are still coming. That ain't stopped people from trying to get back here. And it's folks that
this narrative that everyone, you're going to cross all of these slave states to try to get north. When you go into what we know as Mesoamerica,
Mexico,
and you reunited with your people and had the same freedom. So later on, when we go back, we're going to revisit the Mexican-American War, and they're really going to realize why it was such a big deal. It's because the Mexican government, the Mexican nationals, the Mexica, and all the rest of what we know as the Maya were down there and saying, we're not dealing with any slaves. You slave people, you plantation owners, you can't come to this region of what we call Texas, Tejas. You can't come here with that. That's what started the battles, and that's what started the war and getting into the Alamo and what later became known as the Mexican-American War. So if you're in, let's just say, for example, you in the Gulfport, Mississippi. There's a plantation down that way. You can just take a boat and you end up in the Yucatan, you end up in Cuba, you end up in Jamaica, and all these other places you could go to. Why would you try to go through all of Mississippi, try to get all the way through Tennessee, Kentucky,
like a boogie board,
and keep going to try to make your way to Canada? But that's the narrative that they want to keep trying to tell us, and it's not making sense. Or why would you go into Florida? Because you knew you were protected by the Seminoles that were there, or those that were misnomer as the Seminoles. Why would you go through the southern part of the state to another part of the state to another with a chance of being captured? There's some things that are just not logical. But Sister Gabrielle, I'll put another link in there. But I want to say this because Brother Copper, when you said what you said,
shout out to Copper India.
I'm gonna give you an example. This is what gets people in trouble, and they're not realizing something. The British was the one that started this narrative and said the Garifuna or the Garinagu, either way, same people, said that they got started, right, because they were a mixture of Arawak, Carib, and Africans, right? That these Nigerians came over here and it was a slave ship that crashed. Right, 2 or 3 slave ships that crashed, but turned everybody what we know as black, or the blacks of this land. Like I said, the Costa Negroes, Negros Teteros, the blacks of this thing. So the year that they say this ship took place was 1635. Now, let's go back to what we're talking about today. What was going on in the early 1600s in the land that's called New Amsterdam that became known as New England? Just Gabrielle, you there? Or you cooking okra over there? What you doing?
You talking? Or
what you been reading about all day today?
Pequot Forest.
The Pequot who?
The Pequot.
Pequot what? Pequot who? What you say?
Trying to shake the devil off.
Yeah, I don't know everything, but because now you got the link for yourself and you can read it for yourself. And this is for the other groups. Stop taking an L from these Pan-Africanists. I tell people again, I don't know everything, but stop being stubborn and not using information that those with A2 have been giving you to help bail you out. We've been giving you lifelines. And because, I don't like those guys over there. I don't like those guys over there. You just steady getting punched in the face. You steady getting your kidneys knocked all out of your body. You like that song with Will Smith? Me talking about, I think I could beat Mike Tyson when he said, I'm thinking, no, my bowels release. Hit you so hard in the side. You just keep taking L's. And you don't have to keep taking those L's. I know it's quiet. I know the chat doesn't stop. But let me move on. Here are your cash crops from the Mandi. It says they grow rice, which is, kind of suspect. They have their African rice. The staple crop as well as yams. And everybody gets, oh, yeah, yams originated over here. Yam/sweet potatoes. The Americas.
Period.
Cassava. Uh-oh. There's no doubt with cassava.
Manure root. Period.
Originated in the Americas. How is this these West African people in Sierra Leone's cash crops today? Here's a good one. Uh-oh. Here's another one. Cocoa. Uh-oh. I hope everybody can hear me. Give me some googie eyes, a 1, a hashtag, a Juan, or something. Cocoa. Ginger. Uh-oh. Here's a good one. Peanuts. What did Run DMC tell you? George Washington Carver made the peanut great. Yeah. Cocoa. Their cash crops. West Africa, Sierra Leone. How are they growing these crops when West Africans knew nothing about these crops? Come on, son.
Shout out to OG Doodle.
How did that become their cash crop? Please tell me. Peanuts, America. Cocoa, America. Yams. Oh, yams. Please tell me. How does that happen? Palm oil and kernels, as in kernels of corn. I don't even have to say anymore. We no longer have to continue dealing with those that keep saying West Africans came over here and civilized the Americas. When I already said, all you do is keep reading about my people. They started here and went to the islands, Pacific Islands, into Asia and into Northeast Africa. Not West Africa. That's my people. that I know. The tutu shiu. And like I said, the words reflect that. So when they keep saying, oh, those are Monday words, I can tie back to Monday, you're not going back further enough. Because even in their own creation story, they're telling you they started with the land of Maize, the Americas. Anybody got any question? Anybody got any comments? Anybody got any hate mail that I can read live on the air? It doesn't matter. You can't deny. How are you going to tell the people that are there
step up off the curb and get knocked out like your father used to, little ass nigga?
You know? When they tell you, it started with the red maize. So,
Rojo masa.
So we know if maize is was a crop that was manipulated by man. Maize didn't grow naturally; had to be manipulated by man, and that was 8,000 years ago. At least 8,000 years ago. No one has to be further than that, but they at least traced it back to 8,000 years ago. Now, somebody go back and tell me when the pyramids in Egypt were built. Somebody want to go?
The storehouses.
It was way shorter than 8,000 years ago. See, like I said, I'm not playing anymore. And African tendencies. I'm not playing with these sucker MCs on both sides, claim to be Indians, but you got Pan-African tendencies. I'm not playing with you anymore. So go ahead, brother Barbara.
If I remember correct from reading and researching, maize comes from two different forms of grass that was manipulated to form what we know as corn. If I'm correct, isn't that a form of science?
Yes, sir, it is.
So how primitive could these people really be if they have the ability to manipulate two different crops to get a brand new one with the intention on getting a brand new one?
GMO.
And feeding the whole world, which is why I say again, you go to India, Hindustan, and you will see things, crops that they're holding in their hand from the Americas. 7 years that the men, you will find the same thing in Sumeria. In Egypt, you see the writings about the storehouses during the times of famine. Same tradition that you have the 7 years that the Mandingo talk about. These 7-year festivals, these 7 years that you read in a collection of books called the Bible that says dealing with your credit, that every 7 years, the negative marks on your credit fall off. Where did they get this stuff from? These 7 MCs you got put in a line dealing with these 7 ruling tribes of the Americas at that time. We went from 4 Balaam to the 7.
7 bushy places.
Better known as your Ek-Ahu. Or Wahu. Or Awah. Dealing with the waters. You know them better as the jaguar people or the cat people. And all throughout that temple, when I say again, of Bunham Park, man, they sure look like us in every shade. I don't know how that happened. How do you draw people or in all of this that you never saw?
Adios. They intermarried with the indigenous people. So now they're saying that these Africans, right, that arrived at the Mosquito Coast, right there in Cape Gracias a Dios, which is in Honduras, right on top of Nicaragua, said that they were from Providence Island Colony. These so-called Africans were from Providence Island Colony slaves. And I'm going to show you who was there in Providence Island Colony. Isla de Providencia. Isla de Providencia, or Old Providence, is a mountainous Caribbean island, part of the Colombian Department of Archipelago of San Andreas, Providencia, and Santa Catalina, in the municipality of Providencia in Santa Catalina Islands, lying midway between Costa Rica and Jamaica. So in between Costa Rica and Jamaica. It says the island was the site of an English Puritan colony established in 1629 by the Providence Island Company, and was briefly taken by Spain in 1641. What did we just read about the slaves arriving in the Mosquito Coast in 1641? A shipwreck of slaves, black slaves or copper-colored slaves, or negroes, as we read earlier, arrived in 1641. And we see here that this island was taken by Spain in 1641 from the Puritans. They had war, they attacked. All right. The Providence Island Colony was established in 1631 by English Puritans on what is now the Colombian department of Isla de Providencia, about 200 kilometers east of the coast of Nicaragua. Although intended to be a model Puritan colony, it also functioned as a base for privateers operating against Spanish ships and settlements in the region. Alright, so these privateers, if you start doing the research, they turn out to be pirates. They call them privateers, but they were pirates working for the English government or king and queen to basically pirate Spanish ships, like attack Spanish ships, just like the Pirate of the Caribbean movie, and take all their goods. That includes human cargo, unfortunately, and that was Native Americans, as we're going to see later on. The Spanish ships was taking numerous Spanish and Portuguese, numerous Native American people from all over South America, Newfoundland, up in North America, in Canada, Nova Scotia, from South Carolina. They had ports in Cartagena in Colombia. They had ports in Florida and Hispaniola, in Jamaica, Bermuda. And so they were, basically raiding these ships and taking their slaves. So sometimes it happened the opposite way. As we see in here, it says, in 1641, the Spanish overran and destroyed the colony. So in 1641, the Spanish arrived and attacked. And we read earlier that the Negroes that arrived in Mosquito Coast, or the Mosquito people, were from basically slaves that ran away from Providence Island. And we see why now, because the Spanish attacked. So who were these slaves that the Puritans had? Who were these Negroes that the Puritans had? These pilgrims. These are the same people. 1620s, when the Pilgrims arrived in Massachusetts. This was established in 1631. And through the Providence Island Company, which you'll see is the same as the Pilgrims, and the Massachusetts Bay Company. So let's see who they had actually, these Providence Island Colony, who they had as slaves. And from the book Providence Island, 1630 to 1641, the other Puritan colony by Karen Cooperman. We're going to get this excerpt right here. It says, the Spanish found Providence Island well provided with arms and ammunition, including 60 pieces of heavy artillery and a great deal of equipment stockpiled for the attempt to colonize the Mosquito Coast. The island was inhabited by 381 slaves who were sold at Cartagena and Portobello by order of the king, and about 350 English settlers, including some formerly on San Andreas and elsewhere, who had consolidated on Providence Island after the 1640 attack. So just to stop right there real quick, it says basically this is the account of the Spanish arriving that day of attacking Providence Island, the Puritans, right? And it says that they were heavily armed, and that they actually were planning to go colonize the Mosquito Coast. These Puritans, they were going to the Mosquito Coast, probably already back and forth, right? And it says that the slaves, or the people that they had there, were sold in Cartagena, Colombia. So they grabbed some of the Puritan slaves and sold them in Cartagena and Colombia after that. It says, the number of slaves was much lower than the Spanish expected. They learned that the English, fearful of rebellion, had dispersed many of their slaves to St. Christopher's and Bermuda. So they had sent many of their slaves to other islands, the Puritans, right? Now they were bringing these slaves from Massachusetts. I'm going to show you. Watch. 18th century accounts of the Mosquito Coast hold that the ship manned by the rebellion slaves was wrecked south of Cape Gracias a Dios in 1641. Again, that was in Honduras, and that's where the so-called slaves or so-called Africans were shipwrecked, right, in 1641, and they were from Providence Island, Puritan slaves that they had escaped. It says these memoirs differ on the escapees' origin. So they still really don't know the origin, right? The theory is that they were fleeing from Providence Island as it fell to the Spanish. All accounts agree that the newcomers melded into the native population. Alright, so as you can see, more correlation that they were coming from Providence Island after the Spanish had invaded and attacked the Puritans. So it was the slaves of the Puritans who fled. Alright, so I just wanted to give you a reference of where you can find Providence Island or Isla de Providencia. So you can see where the red marker is. That's basically the island. And right behind, under it, or right next to it, you see Nicaragua. Right under, you see Costa Rica. Above it, a little bit towards the northeast, you'll see Jamaica. So right in between Costa Rica and Jamaica, right next to Nicaragua. So there was a Pilgrim Puritan colony here in the 1600s. 1629 they arrived. You said that. You heard that, right? And then 1631 they established the colony. All right. So did you know that the Pilgrims had another colony all the way down here in Central America? And you know who they were bringing, right? I'm going to show you who they were bringing down here as slaves. So you can see up towards the northwest, you see Gracias a Dios. That's basically where the shipwreck landed, supposedly, and Gracias a Dios towards the shore. And so you can get a little reference. So let's read a little bit more about Isla de Providencia. It says here in this book, Brethren by Nature, New England Indians, Colonists, and the Origins of American Slavery. So we're going to jump to this part of the book. It says here, the rapid entry of Indians into the labor market in other English colonies in the late 1620s and the 1630s exposed this gap. The anomalous status of Indians as laboring groups that occupied a legal gray area between servants of European origins and African slaves attracted attention and legislation a year before the Pequot conflict, right?
In Barbados and Providence Island, right? Two colonies with close ties to New England. All right, so there was Indians being enslaved over there. So it says Pequot and Manicean captives exported out of New England in the 1630s entered an Atlantic world where Indians already composed a significant proportion of the agriculture and public works and infrastructure labor force. So you're seeing they were sending out Pequot and Manicean captives, right? Continuing, says they joined Caribs and Arawaks. So they're talking about the Pequot and Madison. They joined Caribs and Arawaks from the Caribbean islands, Guyana and Venezuela, Miskitos, and members of smaller groups raided by the Miskitos from Central America, and Indians from northern Mexico and South America traded through Gracias de Dios. So they had a trading colony there of Indians in Honduras where this shipwreck landed. Right, and they're telling you that there was already mosquitoes there when the Pequots were being sent. All right, they were joining them. It says a port on the coast between present-day Nicaragua and Honduras that we just mentioned. It says Indian captives from this western rim region also moved to and through Jamaica, which served as a hub of the region's labor market. All right, so Indians. All right, not Africans. By the 1640, the Dutch in New York and the English in Virginia exported Indian captives to Curaçao, Bermuda, and Barbados. All right. Continuing, on the Puritan colony of Providence Island, organized by many of the same figures who backed the Massachusetts Bay Company, despite early efforts to limit African slavery and to prohibit Indian slavery, the slave population exploded after 1634. And slaves outnumbered English colonists by the end of the decade. So they were going crazy with it, enslaving these Indians. Providence Island Company officials and investors differed somewhat on the length and heritability of slave status. Once eminent counselor named Samuel Richworth, who supported the rights of the English servants against company and planter exploitation, also attacked slavery vehemently as incompatible with godly aims and encouraged slaves to rebel. But in practice, by 1634, most planters expected slaves to work for life and claimed ownership
adopted children of non-European workers. Again, a crucial distinction between slavery and servitude. All right, so they're talking about that, first so-called slaves were actually indentured servants. And as he's explaining, they were, arguing what they should do because they were basically enslaving these Indians for life when they were supposed to be just servants. They had a contract to. All right. Such was the demand for labor that despite two major slave revolts and the presence of stiff Maroon community, the government refused to let inhabitants who left the island for any reason take enslaved workers with them because they were needed for construction of public defense projects as well as agricultural work. Captain Bell did receive permission to sell his plantation and leave with his Indian woman, wife, and Negroes in 1638. Possibly Bell's Indian was a New England captive, all right? A New England captive, all right, from New England. In one of the only surviving documents that mentions the Pequots in May 1638, the company's officials warned the governor of Providence Island that we would have the cannibal Negroes from New England inquired after, whose they are in special care taken of them. So first of all, let's stop here. Look what they're saying. They're saying that there's an official document that mentions that the Pequot in 1638, they were in Providence Island. They were being sent there. If we know the story of the Pequot War with the English and the Puritans, we see that they after they had lost, they were enslaved and sent to the West Indies and even to Cape Verde. All right, in the South, they were sent to other colonies of English colonies.
It says, Misikto Pequot tribal nation. Meet the Indian owners of the largest casino in the Western Hemisphere, the Foxwood Resort Casino, located in Connecticut, and handles more than $9.1 billion a year. In 1993, for the fear of competition, Donald Trump says they don't look like Indians to me. They look like the Indians. Now, we know about the Pequot. We know about who are the indigenous people who they call the cannibal Negroes as an arrogant. Looks like we got a problem here. Who are y'all, First Nation? Y'all might be the ones mixed out to the point of being, you know what I'm saying, Italian mobsters, the French connection. We all know about the mob and them moving drugs through the tribal nations with sovereignty for years. We're going to get into that later on. Why are white tribes allowed to game and do what they do with impunity? You know what I'm saying? Since we're going to throw shots, let's go ahead and, you know what I'm saying, let's go ahead and take the bulletproof vest off since y'all think it's like that, since you think we don't know. Since the real Indians been quiet for a lot of years, we know what's popping. You know what I'm saying? We're going to get into that, what's really popping.
Really? Yeah. You had to drink a problem for a while or something?
Well, it just, the Indians don't really get too along with the firewater and,
Are you an Indian?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Oh,
I thought you were a black guy.
Hey.
You're an Indian?
Yeah.
Oh, come on, man.
Yeah.
What kind of Indian are you?
Like Tonto Indian?
Shinnecock Indian.
Really? You're a Shinnecock?
Yes.
You're a Shinnecock.
Yeah, could have fooled me.
That's the kind I am. So you should be Big Cheek Master.
His family was here when Columbus landed, huh?
Is that right?
Yes.
So you are not a black man, you're an Indian.
I'm an Indian.
No kidding. Now this is a shock.
We are learning more today.
Hey, you look totally black.
Yeah, it's definitely Indian.
Wow, definitely.
So the Indians and the Fire don't get along. You get it.
People go all the way here to what you seem like everybody else would have to follow his lead. Right. Well, y'all both from the same neighborhood.
Yeah, but those are my cousins.
These little shorties about to mess each other up. Oh, shit. I remember that shit. My boys and Indians, cops and robbers. I don't know what the hell they're playing. It's all the same shit, though.
Suriname and Surinese carry the Ingi
as the natives are popularly called, visibly and explicitly. The hunters also appear in the coat of arms of Suriname. The shield is carried by two native men, and anyone who has been to a large Surinamese event, such as the Karaku or the Ketekote, may have seen the relatively many people wear colorful shoulder cloths and indigenous costumes. Surinamese in Suriname, officially known as the Republic of Suriname, is a county on the northeastern Atlantic coast of the South America and is the border of the Atlantic Ocean. To the north, French Guiana; to the east, Guyana; to the west, and Brazil to the south is a small sovereign state in the South America. Like they said, this is because they fought. It says 4 and 6, the mystic numbers, and symbolize the number 3, may possibly be accounted to in different ways on the suggested by a scepter of Poseidon, and Plato says was the first king of Atlantis, and represented by the Greek mythologists as being the son of Kronos, the three-pronged trident being an allusion to the three great islands that formed with his kingdom, North, South America, and Atlantis, that now lies buried under the waves of the Atlantic Ocean. The emblem placed on the hand of the Vu, the god of the, did you see the trident, the atmosphere of the Chaldean mythology, found also in those of the Hindu gods, and likewise represented the three worlds of the great regions of the Egyptians and the Maya hieroglyphics, designs of the characters of the crown. You see a little 3-point crown. And the hieroglyphs for the name of the land of the west, which is later also figured as a sacred tree and the branches. It says the Matayas of the Mayates of Brazil, and Manibus El Quito to the Chuchans and of Darien, Gomars, the generals of De India, speak of the Negro slaves who were held in Panama. So the Negroes figure with frequent in the most remote traditions of Peru, and of the American people. Those men were little and black and lived in groves in the wood. In certain tribes, Ernesto Represte Evaha Aldarian attributes the origin of the nations of the Indians to two wives, one a negress who lived in the shores of Tactura. To this is a race referred to some ancient skeletons of particular structure, very distinct from those of the red American race. Worthy of attention are two crania of exaggerated protagonists with retreating foreheads and Ophias, I don't know what it is. Apophyses, I have no idea. Arches, and were found in the mountains of Sampaza. And Dr. Yun Deos Cardisquila, who certainly reviews the information of the Indian range of the mountain, those mysterious structures of the gods and stones at St. Augustine, have two characters of a Negroid type, both of which are the greatest antiquity and the representative of a singular attribute. A man holds with his hands a great fish, and a woman a snake, which coils over her breast, and the strange figure without doubt does not represent the type of the ancient. Back to be Isabella and Ferdinand. Slow picture we'll run across real quick. Leading me directly to the argument which I have acquired the support of these theories. Secondly, because they have learned the Baron is in another part of the same work, and again, in the last publication, Cosmos sees that to the consonance of the idea of some of the others who have held that there were originally various distinct creations of beings of the human race, contrary to the other faith that God hath made of one blood all the nations upon earth. In the same chapter, he says, perhaps this race of the copper-colored men, comprehended under the general name of American Indian, is a mixture of Asiatic tribes and the aborigines of the vast continent, as if two races were essentially distinct from each other, as if the copper-colored men comprehend under a general name of American Indian, with all their mixtures, could not all of them have been only different migrations of Asiatic tribes earlier or later arrived on the new continent. It is in his last word, Cosmo Baron von Humboldt expressly acknowledges the unity of the human species, and he seems at the same time to qualify the admissions by quoting approvingly a passage in the works of John Mueller, thus, whether the existing race of men are descended from one from the several primitive men of question now determined by. Wish I could get the whole, one day we'll pull the whole document on that. I messed it up and cut it off. So the Olmecs, or the Olmecs, or the Olmecs of the ancient Anahuac, whose name means old devil in Aztec Anahuac, and are said to have settled in Anahuac after the Ottomans, but with the allies there, Zycayans, whose name we may recognize in the Suyatecas, and the Zycayans sound like the Mayans or the Zymaicans or the Jamaicans in the modern times, and we probably, the old Zapotecs, the southern Mixtecas, are yet called the Zycayans Olmecs, who also settled in Mexico. They didn't build any major cities, but were widespread and prosperous, and they were followed by the Incas in the modern day Peru, and finally the Aztecs, also the modern day Mexico. We all know about Fusang. We read these, The land of Fusang situated, Dr. Grants found the answer in a question in a distant 20,000 li at the distance of east of Tehan and Hoisin, stated that the country was situated, thus arrived at the conclusion that Fusang must be found at some point upon the American coast, probably in California. So I have concluded that they have known America since the year 458 AD. In these countries near those were the lands we find the most civilized nations of America. I have thought that were indebted to their civilization, to the commerce which they have had with the Chinese. This is all had sought to establish in this memoir. The origins of the various nations and tribes inhabiting the American continent is a question that has attracted the attention of antiquarians ever since the discovery of the continent 4 centuries ago. The general designation of the Indians given by Columbus and the people whom he met showed the notion that entertained of the Asiatic origin not less than his ignorance of the true position, since the time of numerous antiquarians have given us the idea of research upon the obscure subject. Some have combined many scattered facts so as to uphold this cruel fancies, while others have formed theories, and they hunt over the continent for the facts to prove it. And their various works have brought together comparisons only to show how little we can lead to the finite conclusions have been really ascertained to digest. The most careful of these travelers and the candid set analysis of the work of the antiquarians and the philologists given by H. Bancroft in the fifth volume of the laborious work on the native races of the Pacific states fully upholds the conclusion in the sentence as presented in the statement question, to who investigation and searches in the true darkness covers the origin of the American people as their primitive history, say few centuries preceding the conquest and the darkness and the lighten up, and thereby a dim conjecture which has become a fixed light in the fact in the eyes of the antiquarians whose lively imaginations enable them to see the best in the dark and whose research are sifting out the supports to preconceived opinions. Okay. It says notice of the Caribbean and Central America, the community by Colonel Don Juan Garledo, RFGS, dated the Government House of Trujillo in 1833 through the found in the Caribbean Isles by the European of the first arrival in Americans. The Carib race is identical in outward appearance with the African Negro. Conquered and dispersed, the only remnants of the Caribs occupied a portion of the islands of St. Vincent, which their whole population was brought by the British authorities in 1796 and landed at Port Royal in Roatan, and few of the moments out were transported by the Spanish to Trujillo. The ports remained their parent settlement, and latter day, as the population increased, the colonies of their spread round the shores in the Bay of Honduras and partially the town called Stan Creek to the southwards of Belize, composed of the immigrants from hence who have risen into importance. As you can see, they've been brainwashing and taking their indigenous claim to the land for as long as they. It's just sad, you feel me? This shit is getting out of control. Shout out to those people who tried to give him the history, but had to put all that extra shit in it. Okay, we'll get into the religion real quick. His death, and they say the doctors asked him if he was alive and how it's that he speaks so clearly, and he answered that is he dead, and having known what he wanted to know, they returned him to his grave for where they took him and took from him what we just said. If this were just an isolated report of shamanic resurrection of the dead, it would still have an important bearing on the understanding of the origins of voodoo. But in the fact and the ability to kill and resurrect is a defined skill of shaman throughout the South Americas. It says Whitehead of Wright, 2004. In my ethnographic account of the Kamenia, or the dark shamans among the Patunu of Guyana, the power of resurrection of the Walutak in Panama, the language in the central to the shamanic power. As I was told by one of the informants, my father was so Amerindian. He went school and he could kill and resurrect you in a day. Obviously, this is not to deny African influence and magic of zombie marking, but it is relevant to note that the zombie marking in Haitian voodoo is called the Bakor, not the Hogan, while the Hogan is a priest and associated with the genealogy and the family of magic of curing the Bokor, and is outside a figure and possibly due to the derivation of the role from the indigenous shamanic practice. Within Haitian voodoo, the zombie making is connected with the Bizango ceremony with the Pequot rite of the Bar and Samedi. It is principal deity was actually born in America. According to voodoo practitioners, the Bizango rite itself stems to the earliest slaves transported from Senegal, Gambia, and rebel communities such as slaves together in the refuge of indigenes, and clearly recorded on the Haiti for the early 16th century onward in the fertile context of the melding of African and American shamanic forms. And there were many contacts even when the supposed dispersed order, him and the dramatic aspects of the ritual and the performance of Bahuti described by Payne. It has heretofore been completely ignored, and concern of necromancy in Haiti has been notorious for the practice of voodoo and practically the certain of zombie or resurrection of the dead, although it is usually thought to have been derived exclusively from African practices brought by the black slave. There are a number of reasons, beginning with Payne's text, to suppose that the facts of the aspects of voodoo and necromancy was also strongly informed by the contact with the still surviving aboriginal population of the island. Just as the name of Haiti obviously derived from the native name Haiti, so too do the aspects of the zombie ritual derived from voodoo. Moreover, the term zombie is no less plausibly derived from the cognate word recorded by the Payne and ceremony of the other Caribbean language of the Carapuna, of the Simi, or the Zimi, where also the suffix of Iba and designated the maternal seen no less as the source of the term of the current derivation of the African scholarship, who named the West African deity, one of even associated with the resurrection of death cults over. Of course, the follow the line of reasoning, the risk in committing the same error of ethnographical accession that has previously so limited the interpretations made from Payne's text and the starting of the description of the zombie making in chapter that looks like it would be 27 of Payne's text, and the real evidence here. They take the juice of the leaves and they cut the nails of the hair and the bangs of the dead, and they pulverate them into two stones and mix them with juices and said herbs. They give it to the dead and they drink by the nose or the mouth. And while they do this, they ask the dead person, the doctor, the buiti, which they cause the death, and they ask several times until the dead person speaks as if they were alive in such a way he answers all they want to know from him, saying that the Buhuti did not follow the diet or the occasions was responsible of. The Haiti of the south and the southeast, who had darts of guaiana in the composition of gold and silver and the copper, and who were called the black guaianas. And this might be have been the Negroes of Coquira mentioned by Peter, martyred of Anglarian of some of the American Negro nations. This is of which were many of the this is which are many as we see in the Rafinesque's account of the ancient black nations of America, such as the Charuecas of Brazil, the Black Caribbeans, the St. Vincent's, the Gulf of Mexico, with the Jamassi of Florida, and the dark complected California nations, perhaps the dark men mentioned in. The practice of turning into zombies was documented in Haiti, although it's certainly not frequently an occurrence after a person is chosen by the Madura. The Hogan special potions was prepared using specific plant and poisons, including extracted from a blowfish. These potions caused the person to be totally paralyzed and remain alive, alert, and awake. And the person was then buried alive during a ritual. After several hours, the person was unburied and revived with the antidote and was considered to have been communicated with the dead during the ordeal. The individual spirit was certainly shattered by the experience, with the result was rendered by the docile and easily dominated zombie ritual. Is sometimes referred to as the life after death ritual. It is sometimes recreated in Louisiana in a milder form, which is uh, participants dance with a small coffin until exhaustion in order to channel the spirits of their ancestors.
Blood Club's gonna write her a love letter. Bitches love love letters.
You're gonna see when the sun go down. Talk that tough shit now. What you gonna see? Sicily? Where Marco Polo go? Who do you see? In Columbiana or Columbus Library of Seville is a printed copy of Polo's records in the Library Divorcium Libre de Veste Messer Marco Milanoni, which belonged to Cologne, and it has their manuscript noted by Christopher himself on 76 of 158 pages, showing how well he knew and how much he valued the book, which perhaps is more than any other was his guide. And even if Polo's name doesn't occur in the Admiral's Journey of the Voyages of 1492, or rather the abstract of that journal, which is all that we possess, yet Marco Polo's Cathay and Zipangu are constantly the evidence herein. A week before the land of Guanahani, Columbus opens the Paisan suggested to steer southwest and not made with respects to Zipango 2 days after. The Cuban monarch was now at war. The Khan, the great ships he understood, came to Cuba, a 10 days journey from the Chinese mainland, the cotton of the West Indies, which to be sure of a good market in his city, and the majesty was perhaps in the grand city of Cathay, and it was certain, he writes, while still off the Cuban coast, that I am in front of Zeto or Gunise, the armor harbor of Hanekuga, and again in the Caribbean or the Canabia, which is described to him as the mainland being Española. In the language of the north coast of South America, Columbus believes he has last located the name of the kingdom of the Khan. The book of Marco Polo is the fullest and the most remarkable record of the great age of the medieval overland intercourse, and the earliest Asiatic expression of the Catholic and European, which began with the Carpini and with Roebuck, but Polo's journey does not exhaust the movement, mainly commercial and the missionary of the Western Christendom upon the Mongol world under the Tartar emperors. There are little hindrance of the religious bigotry and mercantile exclusiveness, and the extent of the Tartar dominance, and unchallenged by the serious rivals of the north of the Himalayas and the Hindu Kush and the Arabian deserts, enabled the Europeans favored by the Khans to explore and observe traffic of the Politavires from the Black Sea of the Polish frontiers of the Pacific to the Indian Ocean of the South Siberian plains. In many directions, they know the ledge worn by polos is amplified. The Catholic preachers are traitors in collecting. I should know bad. Y'all can hit pause and read some of this if y'all want to. I know this is becoming a long video. I ain't trying to get to my boy Chopped Away. Trying to Choctaw. It says, listen, according to the story and the canon, sometimes significant, the whole tribe cries because she was a good black woman. It's because she was a good black woman. Because she was a good black woman in a canoa. It says the most popular peninsula, the book of the discovery of the American by Christopher Columbus, his high authority, and he says the Yamasee Indians were negroes, and they were known afterwards as the fiercest of the Indian tribes in the Southwest, and they were well known. Yamasee Indians were Africans. You see what I mean? In fact, that they were much darker than the other Indians, because why? We know about the invasion of the Genghis Khan, and the hair was different too. And this was the last frontier, basically, as you can see. As it stated, one of the most distinguished ethnologists of the world, and another collaborative proof that the Spaniards found one Negro was equal to 10 Indians in work, and therefore the importance of those Indian Negroes carried them to the West Indies to experiment with. As you can see, they kept on taking more and more of us down there. Says the new laws of Castilian receipts equate the category of India over permanent bondage. And when it became clear to Charles V that the resistance of the implementations of the new laws in the Spanish America would be formidable, he decided to begin a home in Castile and Seville, and inspection of those occupied in 1543 and in 1549 resulted in more than 100 indigenous slaves being freed, and the plethora of lawsuits that ensued, generally initiated by the disgruntled slave owners, witness especially those of indigenous heritage, pointed that this period of transformative, although the Indios justifiably feared the repercussions of stepping forward to petition for their freedom, many did so, and the word spread quickly among the Indios living throughout Castile. But it was rarely easy and straightforward, and the litigants were barren and branded and sold, and the stakes were high, and both masters and slaves. Thus, the courtroom became a site of Indios and masters, purposely manipulating descriptive physiognomic categories of abstract notions of belonging in their attempts to fix the Indios as a particular slave or to liberate them from the decades of bondage. Determining their status was rarely straightforward, and it took years of protective legislation to be implemented seriously to the systematically in Castile faced the increasingly legal restrictions after 1542. Slave owners in Castile developed two strategies aided in identifying the Indios as slaves. The first was to argue that their Indio slaves did not in fact originate from the dominion under the control of the Indies of the ocean seas and the King of Spain, rather that they Portuguese vassals were by law still considered slaves even after the political unification of the Iberian Peninsula in 1580. The second line of attack was to emphasize that the lineage of the slaves over his or her place of birth naturalized. So once you were naturalized over there, they said it didn't matter that you're from America. It didn't matter, Negro. You still look like a Negro. Prove it. It says this meant that in some cases the Indio litigant had been asked to prove that their mothers were not of Moorish or Northwest African heritage.